record. So this will be recorded and we can provide you with the recording later if you would like. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Courtney Thompson, who is our president and CEO, who's going to introduce our fantastic panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. This is something that we've been talking about wanting to do for the last few months, and this seemed like the perfect time to do it as we're starting into a new year and just trying to engage in a different way. So we are really thankful for the 4 HR professionals that are with us today. We have Latoya Garrison, who is the Assistant Coordinator of Career Services at Blue Ridge Community College. We have Allison Heinrich, who's the owner of Alley & Co. She does lots of things, including having an esthetician school, her own spa, and also an active skincare line that she has created. And she was also our Young Professional of the Year last year, which is really cool. Then we have Melody Godby, who's the Human Resources Manager for DuPont Community Credit Union, and Jenny Lee, the Chief HR Officer for Colliers, Virginia. So we really want to thank these ladies for taking the time to be with us this morning. And we'll let each of them do their presentation, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And if you have questions in the meantime, feel free to use the chat and we'll grab those as we go. So to start out, I'm going to turn it over to Latoya Garrison from Blue Ridge Community College to talk about resumes and how important those are. So Latoya, take it away.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Latoya Garrison, Assistant Coordinator Career Services at Blue Ridge Community College. So today I want to provide you some information on how to create that professional resume. We want to talk about what is the resume, why do we want to do a resume. I'm going to give you 5 quick tips on creating the resume, and then I have a special offer for you. So let's jump in. All right, so for the resume, it is the best marketing tool that you're going to create. All right. So I like to think of the resume as if you're writing a story. You're telling the story as to who you are, what are your skills, your abilities, your education, your experience. And I say story because it should be short. I don't want you to write a book. Okay. We want to keep it short and concise. All right. And so when we look at the resume, the reasons that we want to do it, why? We want to be able to screen applicants. We want to give you a chance to provide some information about yourself to kind of set the background, to get to know you a little more. And ultimately, you want to win the interview with the resume. Okay, so here are my tips for you. Tip number 1, make a good first impression. Okay, so on the top half of your resume, that's the attention getter. When employers or HR managers or recruiters are looking at your resume, they're really scanning that on the onset to see, do you have those key qualifications that they're looking for, those transferable skills? So you want to make sure that you make it easy on them and give it to them up front at the top half of your resume. You also want to make sure that you know, what do you have to offer? What are you bringing to the table? Okay. And you want to make sure also that you have clarity on the position that you want. Okay. So let's talk about that a little bit more. And tip number 2, where we want to focus on the employer's needs. Tailor your resume for the position. Create the resume for the position. Now, it used to be that you just wrote a resume. It was a blanket resume. You applied for any and all positions. But now you want to create the resume for the position that you're applying for. Be sure that you know what the qualifications are. And usually the employer is going to put that information in a job description, so that you can start to build your resume upon the qualifications that they're looking for and the qualifications that you have. And here's a good question that maybe later on in the presentation we can talk about. For the qualifications, do you apply to a position in which you have all of the qualifications, most of the qualifications, or how is it? That's a good topic for discussion. We can bring that up later. And most importantly, don't make up stuff. Don't fluff your resume to look good. You want to keep it truthful, keep it honest, because it may come back and bite you if you try to fluff it up and stretch the truth. Okay. Tip number 3, choose the resume format that is good for you. All right. Now, the most common resume that we're used to seeing is the chronological resume. That's where you're taking the experience and the education in that reverse chronological order, starting with the most recent, and you're working your way backwards. So with the chronological resume, the emphasis is going to be on those job details, and you want to make sure that you give some good details. Tell that story. What is it that you're doing in those positions? You may be one that does not have a lot of job detail, but you have skills. And so you may want to look at the functional or skills resume, in which the emphasis is less on the jobs, the positions that you held, but more so on your skills, okay? This type of resume is ideal for those who may be career switching, or for those just starting out and you don't have a lot of experience. Then we have the combination, or you may hear it called the hybrid resume, in which you have a little bit of both the chronological resume and the functional resume. So you may be doing some summarizing and highlighting some key achievements that you've held in those positions. All right. And so you may ask, well, how long should the resume be? Good question. Typically, we want to keep that resume 1 to 2 pages, and I would lean on the side of 1 if you can fit it on 1 page, but no more than 2 pages. Okay. Tip number 4. What do we want to include on that resume? And these are some essentials, I like to think of it. Your header, okay, which is going to include your contact information. Again, we want to make it easy on the recruiter how to get in contact with you. So you may want to include your full address. You may just want to include your name and an email address or a phone number. Either way, if you're going to use the email address, make sure it's professional. For your phone number, make sure that your voicemail is professional and that is not full, okay? You also want to include a summary. Tell the employer, recruiter, who are you? Kind of think of it as that elevator speech in a summary format. So you're going to lean on the type of position that you're looking for and back that up with some highlight of skills that you bring to the table. Your professional experience, which can also include your leadership experience, your skills, and your education. Drop in the chat some other information that you may consider adding to your resume. These are just like the base, the essentials that pretty much you're going to find on all resumes. Some additional things that you may want to include if you have professional affiliations, your civic and community involvement, recognition. Those are some other things that you may want to include. What I don't want you to include, however, are references. Keep those references off of your resume and use a separate sheet to have your 3 to 5 professional references. And you don't even have to put the statement on there. References are available upon request. That's another old school thing. We don't want to do that anymore, okay? Tip number 5, because your resume is your marketing tool, we want to make sure that you present it well, okay? So it should be visual appealing, be consistent throughout your resume. Make sure there are no errors, no spelling errors, no grammatical errors. Just if you need to, make sure someone else reviews your resume, give you a critique of it before you send it out there and use it for your job applications. Use some action words, some power words to liven up your resume, your story, and declutter. You don't have to have everything on your resume. We want that 10 to 15 year range. Anything more than that, you probably don't want to put it on your resume. So make sure it's decluttered, keeping that 10 to 15 year range. And my freebie to you, if you email me, careers@brcc.edu, I will email you a free Power Words PDF so that you can have those great action words to use as you're creating your resume. And if we have any Blue Ridge students on the webinar here, here's your QR code for the Blue Ridge Pass event. Okay, well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Latoya. That was awesome. I think resumes are so important, especially in this day and age of technology and things being done digitally and through online sources, that having a good resume is really important. And I kind of laughed when she was talking about your contact info. It's surprising how many you get. And Melody and Jenny probably see this a lot since they get those resumes where there's no phone number or email or anything. So that's
It's
kind of
like,
hard.
yeah, how am I supposed to get back in touch with you? I don't know how.
Yeah, but you definitely, and I think too, asking somebody to help critique that is super important. If there's an HR professional in your life, or if you have somebody like Latoya who works in career services, having them, especially that very first summary at the top, under your header with all your information, and then that quick summary about yourself, that's so important because that's the first thing that catches someone's eye. And then definitely the tip about customizing your resume to the position. Employers can tell in about 2 seconds if you have just sent out a mass blanket of resumes that are all the same. That's not going to attract them because that position may have nothing to do with what you have on your resume. So definitely look at the position. And along with that, take some time to think about the position you're applying for and how you fit into that, what skills or experience you have that go along with that particular position, and use that in that summary. I've seen them too, where people literally just copied and pasted the job description into the summary. Well, the HR person that's reading your resume probably also wrote that job description, so they're going to recognize that. So just, take the time, make it important. Resumes are the very first, like Latoya said, win the interview. If you don't have a good resume, or if you have errors on it, or if it's just a hot mess, you're never going to get an interview, which means you're not going to get that position. So really good tips, Latoya. Thank you for that.
And Courtney, can I add to regarding the resumes? One, be organized. For myself, I like to keep a master copy of my resume where I have everything that I've all done in any position that I've held. I keep that for myself. No employer sees that, but it's my working resume. So as I'm creating my resume for different positions, I can pull from my master resume to customize for whatever position I'm applying for. So that may mean I have different variations of my resume. I may have a chronological resume. I may have a functional resume, depending on the type of position that I'm applying for.
That's an excellent tip, because I know it's hard if you're applying for a new position or an advancement at your current career. It can be really hard to remember those designations or the certifications that you got or the different projects that you were part of. So keeping it updated as you go, that's a great idea. So thank you, Latoya. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Heinrich with Allie & Co. She's going to talk about dressing for success. And if you know Allie, especially in person,
I think she froze up.
I was gonna say, did Courtney freeze?
I think so.
All right, Allison, you can go ahead and take it over.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to get really good at this. All right, so you have now, per Latoya, you've slam dunked your resume. That's awesome. And that's your first impression. Then you're coming in to have another first impression. That impression is in person or now over a Zoom. So quick tip from Forbes.com is within the first 7 seconds of meeting, people will have a solid impression of who you are. And some research suggests 1/10 of a second is all it takes to determine traits like trustworthiness. So I think that's really important when you're going for a job interview, to make sure that in that very first impression that you feel trustworthy and you feel professional. So I have some tips for that. Where do you begin? Number one, dress specifically to your industry. And what I mean by that is if you are going for a job at the bank, you're going to dress very differently than if you're going to get a job at a local marketing firm. If you're going to be in a creative position versus a more very strict and streamlined position. So make sure that you have the right clothes for the position that you're going for. But when you're getting dressed, make sure you're comfortable. So if you've never worn a suit before, don't say, well, you know what, I'm going to grab a suit and I'm going to wear it to this interview. And it's the first time I've worn a suit in 5 years. You're probably going to look uncomfortable. And if you look uncomfortable, that is instantly going to make it seem that you're untrustworthy. So some quick things to do is just grab a blazer. If you've never worn a suit, don't go through the whole thing. Or you can, for women, just grab a sweater. You don't have to have a suit jacket. And then avoid those perfumes and cologne. The scents can quickly turn somebody off as quickly as they can turn them on, but a lot of times a scent can turn someone away. So making sure you're not wearing a heavy perfume or cologne is really important. And then people always forget this one, but check your fingernails. If your hands look dirty and you go to shake someone's hand, they're gonna notice that little thing. And again, that would be very unprofessional. So top color that you can wear to any interview is blue. So blue is considered the #1 color to wear for an interview. Blue conveys feelings of calm, stability, and trust. Wearing blue also portrays you as a confident individual with a team player attitude. It can make you stand out and leave the interviewer feeling impressed. If you don't have blue, that's okay. You can go gray. But I have 2 pictures of over here. One is for men and one is for women, where you could just wear a blue tie, but you want to make sure that your shoes and your belt match. You don't want black shoes and a brown belt. You really do want those to go together. It's going to create a very consistent picture. And for women, if you're not going to wear a blazer or a sweater, that's completely okay. You know, it's summertime, you want to wear a t-shirt. Just make sure again that if you have on a belt, if it's black, then your shoes would also be black. And then you can see in the picture that her jewelry is statement, but it's not overpowering. So for women, we have to really make sure that the jewelry that we're wearing could be a statement piece, but it's not overpowering the overall picture of when someone's looking at us. For women too, I love a good skirt. I think that it's definitely a power play to wear a skirt and look very put together in a skirt suit, but pantsuits are also great too. So hair and makeup, we get this question a lot. Although makeup is a great way to express yourself, no matter what type of interview you're going for, it's really best to remain conservative with your makeup if you're a woman. So you want your natural beauty to shine through. So what I mean by that is you don't want to wear a smoky eye to a job interview, whether it's on a Zoom or in person. You want your natural self to show through. And as for your hair, it's best that you don't have, and I warm my hair up, but I'll show you what I mean for women and or for men. You don't want your hair down where you could potentially be touching it or tucking it through the whole interview. I know that's a nervous habit for a lot of people, is to touch our hair. So men, if your hair is sweeping over, you're doing this. We don't want to be doing that through the whole interview. So it's best to take your hair and have it away from your face. If you've styled your hair and it's away from your face, that's okay too, but you don't want your hair falling in front of your face consistently through your interview and touching it. And then we want our body language is part of our dressing for success, because they're going to be looking at your body language to see again how trustworthy you are, and if your body language is matching what they think your body language should match. So how do you do that? Get ready as soon as you step out of the car into interview mode. You know, someone could be watching you from the window. Your waiting room is another area where they're watching how professional you are. Are you engaged as soon as you walk in? Are you slouching in your chair waiting for the interview? Or are you ready for your interview? Those are things that someone is going to look at. And then once you get into the room with the hiring manager, it's very flattering to mirror the movements of the hiring manager. So if the hiring manager is doing consistent body language movements, it's okay if you mirror those same movements. And what that's going to do is, if you are ready when you get out of the car, it's going to begin on a positive note, and then mirroring those movements of the hiring manager will end on a positive note. Before COVID, I would have said to have a very firm handshake here as well. And that also is going to lead back to making sure we have clean hands. But currently, it is seen as inappropriate, to shake hands. So taking a step back from that and finding other ways to build that trust and to build that first impression through the way that you look and the way that you're dressed and the way that you're carrying yourself through the interview. Does anyone have any questions?
That's a great tip about when you get out of the car to already be in interview mode, because you're right, you never know who's watching. It doesn't sound funny to say don't shake hands all these years. That's the first thing you learn, is how to give a good handshake. Any questions for Allie?
Yeah, and I also thought the other interesting thing that people don't realize is the color that you're wearing really speaks directly to the person interviewing you. If it's crazy to think that a color could make or break a job, but it does. And, making sure a lot of people haven't interviewed in a while. They've been in consistent jobs, and this is a first change for them. And, finding a blue shirt in their closet might not be the first thing that they think of. So, building trust in just these little tiny ways, I think is really one of those ways that you can land a job when you haven't been in the industry or gone for an interview in a long time.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Allie. All right, Melody Godby from DuPont Community Credit Union is going to talk to us about interview skills, so that flows right in perfectly. Melody?
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, I'm just going to start. Okay, awesome. So I am super excited. The alignment between LaToya and then Allison, talking about the resumes and then going into the professional dress, the professional attire, leads right into what I'm going to be talking about today for the interview skills. So the interviews start from the first point of contact, which I think is so important. So, Allison talked about when you get out of the car and, being aware of that. I have, in my experience, and that is true, we do kind of watch, like, who's getting out of their car. I've seen people get out of their car and junk has rolled out, trash has rolled out. That is not the greatest, impression. It could be they get out, they're smoking, and they flick it across the parking lot. Not a good impression. So all of it starts before you even get in the building. And actually it starts from the first point of contact. Let's say I call you for an interview and you're rude or you're disrespectful or you sound like you are not interested or you just woke up. That is an impression. So just be very careful. Think about the minute you have a contact, you have an opportunity to make that first impression. And what do you want that to say about you? Whether you're talking to the hiring manager, the VP of HR, or you're talking to the receptionist that called you. You want to make sure that you are making that first impression. So prior to the interview, it is important that you do your research. So LaToya talked about how you customize your resume. And then Allison talked about how you dress for the environment, dress for the type of employer. If it's in the bank, it's a little more conservative. If it's marketing, it might be a little more creative, a little bit more relaxed. You need to, so those are such great tips because getting a job is a job. That's what I have always told everyone. It is not something, it's not a plug and play. You have one thing that matches every employer or meets every employer's expectations. And so you want to make sure that you do your research. That cannot be more important when you think about interviewing, because that employer wants to know, what do you know about us? And I can promise you, if you come to the credit union, that is one of the first questions we're going to ask you. What do you know about us? Why did you apply for this position? What spoke to you? What attracted you? What do you know about us as an organization, our values, our mission, our goals, our objectives, what type of work environment? I want to know that. I just don't want to hear you recite the facts off of the website. we were founded in 1959. We have this many branches. That's great. Do your research, but I also want you to get a little bit more intimate with that, because I want to know that you have really thought about, is this the company that you want to work for? Does it align with you also in your personal goals and objectives? And then practice. Cannot stress this enough. Practice, practice, practice. You know that there are going to be questions that get asked. 9 times out of 10, someone's going to ask you, what do you think your strengths are? What do you think your weaknesses are? They're going to ask you some of those behavioral interview questions. Tell me about a time when you led a project, or tell me about a time when you had a conflict. And be prepared. Think about the type of questions you may be asked based on the position, the industry, the expectations, and, practice with someone, an HR professional, your parents, your spouse, whoever it is. But it helps put you a little more comfortable. It gets you ready to start thinking about some of the things that may be asked. LaToya had such a great tip about keeping that kind of main resume where you mark down the designations, the projects, the experiences that you've had. That is so golden, because you can pull from that to think about a project or a time when maybe you had an experience and you've got it, you've researched it, you've reviewed it, you've thought about it, and you're ready for that interview. Okay. So during the interview, this to me is one of the keys to a successful interview, is going into it remembering this is a two-way conversation. Not only is the organization interviewing you, but you are also interviewing them, because again, you want to make sure it's not just a job. I can tell you at the credit union, we're looking for people who want to make a career. They want to be a part of our mission. They want to be a part of our purpose and what we're about. And so this is your opportunity to ask questions, to find out about the organization. It is not meant or intended to be this grilling session where this employer just grills you with all these questions. You go into it with the mindset that this is a two-way conversation. Allison touched a lot on professional attire, and I cannot stress that enough. In my career, I have been doing this for 28 years. I have seen a variety of attires, from shorts, flip-flops, ratty sweatpants, ratty t-shirts, to 3-piece suits. It's kind of the whole gamut. Again, you want to do your research, get to know the organization, make sure that you are meeting kind of what their culture is. But there is a level of, even if it's a manufacturing position, you do not show up in a t-shirt and jeans. You still need to show up in some type of professional attire, a nice shirt that is pressed, it is clean, it is not wrinkled, and nice, relaxed slacks. They do not have to be, it doesn't have to be suit slacks, but it still needs to be a professional slack. And again, those little things, making sure that your clothes are pressed and clean and neat. Your hair is clean and neat. Your fingernails, that was such a great tip. A lot of times we don't think about that. That is all an impression. And then think about your presence. Allison mentioned about the hair, and that's something I have to be aware of. I have very big hair, and so that's something I have to be aware of because I'm constantly messing with it. So such a great tip there about pulling that back. But also being aware of your presence. Are you slouching? Are you making good eye contact? Are you, being aware? Are you engaged in the conversation? Are you fidgeting? I am someone, I talk with my hands a lot. I'm extremely animated. And so making sure that you are aware of those behaviors. So, a lot of times I'll tell people, if you're extremely animated like I am and talk with my hands, maybe you just want to put them underneath your lap. That way it keeps you from, just kind of you're waving your hands around, because, if you're someone who does that, that can be very distracting. You want to remember in the interview, when it comes to attire, when it comes to your presence, you don't want anything that distracts from you. You want the focus to be on you and your skills and your experience and your qualifications. So you want to minimize any other distractions. So if you're holding a pen and you're clicking it, put it down. Be aware of that. If you're fidgeting, if you're moving around, if you're slouching, be aware of that, because that speaks to you. It speaks to your interest. And again, it's distracting, and you don't want that to take away. And then, of course, be aware of what you're not saying. And a lot of that's just your body language. You know, you don't want your arms to be folded. You don't want your facial expressions to show that you're not positive, or, you know, that you've, for lack of a better term, you've got RBF or something like that. You want to make sure that you are displaying a professional, interested, engaged expression and attitude. And keep it professional. You may get asked, you know, tell me a little bit about yourself. Great question. We want to get to know you, and there are things that we want to know about you as a person, but be very careful. You don't need to go but so far. You don't need to talk about your church affiliation. You don't need to talk about your political affiliation. You don't need to talk about your plan to have children. Those are things an employer does not need to know. You want to keep it professional when you're talking about yourself. You talk about your objectives, your goals, things that you have learned, your experience. So make sure that you keep it tied to the position and keep it professional. Don't get too relaxed. And keep it positive. You know, maybe you had a situation with a previous employer that maybe didn't end well. You want to always make sure that you keep it positive. You do not want to go into an interview talking negatively about a former employer, former coworkers, a former environment. You want to talk about maybe things that you learned. Maybe you realized that there was some misalignment, but you do not ever want to go into an interview with a negative output or outlook and display that. I can tell you, as someone who's done hiring for so long, that will not get you through to the next round. That is a deal breaker for me every time. I get that there are situations where things aren't always, you know, rainbows and unicorns. However, you need to make sure that you are projecting that positively as a learning experience, and never, you know, speak negatively about a former employer or former coworkers. And then you also want to show ownership and accountability. We all have opportunities. We all have missteps. We all have things that maybe didn't work out the way that we wanted them to. What was my ownership and accountability? What did I learn from that? Maybe you need to talk about a situation where, you know, you got let go from a position. How can you turn that into an opportunity? And you talk about it from that perspective, you know, what you learned from that, and how you have grown as an individual from that experience, and what you take away from that. That is so impressive to me as a hiring manager, as a recruiter, when someone can own that and talk about what they learned from that experience. And then focus on your transferable skills. You know, LaToya mentioned in the resume writing that you want to, sorry, my cell phone is going off. Okay.
Uh-oh, did we lose you?
I see your name, Melody. Did we lose you?
Gotta love technology.
All right, we'll give her a second to see if she comes back on. Those were really good tips, especially the, oh, did we get you back?
Oh, you're on
You're
mute.
on mute.
I'm back. Can
There
hear
you
me?
are. Okay, good. There you go.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so sorry about that.
That's
You
okay.
just have to love technology. Have to love it. So just still figured out this whole Zoom thing. So I'm very sorry. So I'm going to pick up really quick on where I left off. LaToya mentioned to customize your resume to the position. And that is so important. So think about your interview. You want to focus on the transferable skills. You may not have, you know, you may have some things that maybe are not a direct tie, but how can you tie those together? How can you bridge that gap? And how can you focus on, okay, this is the experience and the skills that I have, and this is how it translates to what you have requested or what you're asking for. You want to go in there answering the question, how do my skills and experience align with the organizational goals and the position expectations? You want to answer that question for the employer. I don't want you to leave and think, well, I don't know how they really fit. You want to be able to answer that for me. couple of other things, always explain your gaps in employment. If you had some gaps in employment, you definitely want to explain those. Now, again, I want you to be very careful. This is not where you need to disclose anything that's confidential, but you do want to, let someone, you want to be able to explain why you had this lull in employment or these gaps in employment. And so you want to think about, how you explain that to an employer without, again, going over those more confidential things. Virtual interviews. So that's a big thing right now. And so that's something that, is new to all of us. We're still kind of learning through this process. Before it got started, I'd heard some feedback that, employers are now asking the candidates to stand up to really be able to see, their attire. Did they show up professionally for an interview? And so that's something you want to be prepared for. Be aware of your surroundings. You want to make sure you don't have people kind of running back and forth in the background, a lot of background noise. You want to make sure that your phone is set up maybe against a stack of books, or maybe I have a tripod holder that I use for my cell phone when I'm doing something virtually. And that way it's not moving around, it's not adjusting, it's not flip-flopping. So those are things that you want to be aware of in a virtual interview. And then phone interviews. I have done a ton of phone interviews, and I will tell you, I think they're a lot harder than an in-person interview. And we can hear more than you think. I have heard things in phone interviews that I'm like, I don't know that they wanted me to hear that. Could be eating, smoking, things like that. We can hear it. You don't think we can, and we absolutely can. So you want to treat it as you would if you were in front of me. What are the behaviors that you would display? Would you be eating or drinking or smoking if, you were in front of me in the middle of trying to talk? And so you want to, again, use those same kind of filters when you think about a phone interview. It's just definitely like to put that out there because it can be a little off-putting. And then confidence, sell your brand. LaToya talked about, this is your opportunity to sell, to market yourself. The interview is the exact same concept. You want to sell your brand. You want to let that employer know why you would be a benefit and asset to their organization and how you would help them achieve the goals and the objectives that they have for this position and the organization. So use this as an opportunity. Think about your responses. Do they build my brand or did that hurt my brand? And you want to always have responses that help build your brand, but don't oversell. LaToya talked about in the resume, don't put things that aren't true. Same thing in an interview. Don't oversell and say, I can do this. Oh, I've had great experience in this, or I can, great computer skills if you have no computer skills. You don't want to oversell that. You want to talk about, I'm willing to learn. I'm, eager to learn new things, but you don't want to overpromise or oversell or exaggerate because that will come back to bite you. I can promise you, if you tell someone you have these exceptional Excel skills, they're going to give you a crazy spreadsheet your first day and you're going to be staring at it like, I don't know what to do with this. So do not oversell. And then ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. This is so important. To me, that is a deal breaker. If I ask a candidate, what questions do you have for me? I expect them to have questions. I want them to find out about the organization. And when I say ask questions, I don't mean what's the pay rate for the job. That's something we can talk about in the negotiation phase. But at this point, I am looking for you to ask me questions around the culture. What's a day in the life look like? What makes someone successful at DCCU? What are some of the goals of the organization? Those are the type of questions that are truly impressive to me. And then, of course, you can always ask about, when can I expect to hear something? What are the next steps? Is there anything else you'd like to know about me before we wrap up today? But make sure you end that interview with questions because they've given you this opportunity and they're eager to find out about what you're interested in and what you want to know. And then, of course, you always want to thank the interviewer for their time. Allison mentioned the handshake, and I would always say you start with a handshake, you end with a handshake, always. And it's a firm handshake. It's not a kind of fishy, limp handshake. It needs to be firm. It needs to be confident. But of course, in COVID days, we don't really do handshakes anymore. But you do want to make sure that your gestures and your body language do show that appreciation, show that confidence, and you always thank the employer for their time and their consideration in considering you for this position. So in summary, an interview is an opportunity for you to sell yourself to this employer, as well as to identify if this opportunity in an organization aligns with your value, your goals, and your objectives. Come prepared, ready, and confident. Does anyone have any questions?
That was awesome, Melody. I feel like she needs to go to every high school and teach that to the students.
I have
that
been
was
to a
good.
lot of high schools, and I really
I'm
enjoy
sure.
it. And
I'm sure.
I apologize for the technical difficulty, so thank you for being patient.
No, thank you so much. That was really excellent. I think preparation is key, and I like how she said that getting a job is a job. And just like we were talking about the resumes earlier, you shouldn't be going on an interview and have no idea what the position is or something about the company. And I agree. When I was hiring, when I worked at a bank before coming to the chamber, I never hired anybody. They didn't even get a second interview if they literally had no questions, just because they hadn't either done their research or they weren't interested enough to have questions. It was funny, we were talking before everybody hopped on here, just some of the stories we've had. And I had a person who was coming for an interview. They had a nice resume, nothing fancy, but it was fine. And then they called about 10 minutes before, and number one, like, be early. Don't be like an hour early, but at least be 10 minutes early. But they called me 10 minutes before they were supposed to be there and said, I know we have an interview, but I can't remember where it is. Well, do you think I hired them? Heck no. They got there late, did not get a second interview. So just keep those things in mind, but practicing, as Melody said, you know what kind of questions they're going to ask. I mean, some of them will have maybe a little different angle on it, but you kind of know the things they're going to ask. So be prepared for that. Be yourself, but be professional, and just prepared for that. I think they'll, overlook a lot of things if you are prepared and we're ready to talk about that and ask good questions about the company. Don't be afraid to ask. They want you to know as much about them as they want to know about you in an interview situation. So anyway, thank you, Melody. So that leads us right into our last presenter, Jenny Lee from Colliers, Virginia, and she's going to talk about after the interview. So you have done a great job in the interview. Hopefully you have projected your calmness and confidence and professionalism until you get back into your car. Now what, Jenny?
Well, hello, everybody. I'm looking forward to this, and what great advice you guys have been given so far. So thank you to all the presenters so far. I couldn't echo it anymore. All of it, great tips. I had a thought pop in my mind when Melody was talking about the oversell part. And of course, we talked about that during the resume as well. And I had an interesting approach, somebody that interviewed with me just recently that I really liked, because the way they flipped it to a positive, and I just figured I'd share it as an example. The way they took that was, the question that was posed was areas that they would need improvement, or areas that they anticipate they would be challenged in their first 90 days. And they were very transparent. They shared that was an area they don't have quite as much expertise in as some of the other areas. But then they flipped it to a positive. And the way they did it was they said they linked it in with their teamwork. So, which was another characteristic we were looking for. So they flipped it by saying, but I see that as an opportunity for us to excel as a strong team. So where I'm strong in one thing, someone else might not have as much experience. And in this particular area where I don't have as much experience, I'd lean heavier on my peers who are much stronger in that area. And then we rise higher, successfully as a team, which is a great answer. So they ended up flipping something where we were looking for that experience, but we also are looking for someone who's going to be a great team player. And so it was a great way to do it. There are many ways to flip it to a positive, but that was just an example that popped to my mind just then. So I figured I'd share. All right, so as they said, you've done a great interview, and of course, it's what's next. You have that phase of the being patient and waiting for what happens next. So I'm going to touch on just a few areas, a few suggestions that I've seen either work well for myself or work well for candidates that we ended up selecting, and I compiled it together. I didn't do slides, but if you want, I'm happy to share kind of the talking points that I pulled together if you would like. The first thing I would recommend is to the very same day. I know you're excited. I know you want to go home and have dinner with your spouse, or, you know, celebrate that, oh, finally that interview. It's been, you know, on my mind all week and I nailed it. I want to go out and celebrate. I would encourage you to at least take an hour before you go out for that celebration and just sit down. And while it's all very fresh in your mind, do a review and an assessment of the interview. You know, it went great, right? But sit down and pull out that original, either the job description or the job posting that you applied for, and then pull out your scribble scratch notes that you made frantically all day long while you were interviewing, and put them side by side and really do a deep assessment and fill in your shorthand notes from the interview while it's all fresh in your mind. You know, jot down the things that, you know, they brought up as priorities. You know, at some point during the interview, someone's going to express things that need to be addressed, or things that have been a challenge, or what they're looking to be the priority the first few months in that role for whoever they select. Make sure you're jotting those down. And later that day, make sure you fill in the blanks of all the details that you didn't have time to jot down while it's all fresh in your mind. Make a note, all of that great research you did that they talked about earlier, all of those questions that you wrote down ahead of your interview because you did your due diligence and got prepared. If there's something that wasn't touched on, or something that sparked your interest in your research, that it was something you ran out of time, or you didn't get to ask your questions because y'all ran over. And they said, I know you have questions, we're out of time. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to, whatever the reason is. Don't then just put them aside. Make sure you say, would it be okay if I send you my questions? That doesn't happen often. I think most people who are trained to interview well know you have to allow time for questions, even if you run over. But if something comes up, they have a schedule conflict, make sure you still push those questions forward and ask permission to do so, because you wrote them down for a reason. So did you touch on everything? Did they mention something that maybe gave you a pause? Maybe there's something that came up during the interview. Again, to the point that was made earlier, don't stretch too far, don't oversell yourself. Maybe they brought up the role as a whole lot bigger than what you read initially. And you're starting to think, well, I'm not so sure anymore. You know, is there anything that gives you a pause, anything that gives you hesitation following that interview? Was what came out in the interview the match you thought it was? You know, to the point made earlier, it's a two-way street. You're assessing whether or not this is the perfect job for you, just as much as they're assessing, are you the perfect candidate for the job? So, you know, just make sure it matches what you thought and that it's still a go in your mind. So that's all part of this post-interview assessment. Write down any additional questions that you now have based on new information that was brought up, or now that you've had time to kind of very calmly outside the nervous room where you did the interview, you're very, you know, you're at home, you're relaxed, and you think, oh, I wish I had asked this, you know, so write down all of those new questions that you may have. And then I want you to save these notes, regardless of what happens as you're waiting or as the process continues. Make sure that you save these notes, because a month from now, 2 weeks from now, if you get this job offer, these are going to be great notes for you as you walk into the job, remembering all of the interview priorities that came up, et cetera, and all the questions. So save your notes. All right, so that's your review and assessment phase. I hinted at this, and I'm just going to elaborate a little bit further. It's okay to opt out. It's okay to be picky. It's okay to say, you know what, after this interview, I don't think it's the job I want, or it is bigger than I thought it was, and I'm not quite sure I can meet all of the expectations that they really are looking for. Don't get nervous and be embarrassed to back out. It's okay to do it. It's okay to withdraw. Not every job is the right fit. You know, like I said, you're walking in to see, is this the right job for me? And it's okay to confess and say, you know, after further thought and much assessment, I want to give you the gift of time to focus on candidates that might be a better fit. I would like to professionally withdraw. There are ways you can back out very professionally, and they'll respect you for that you're not wasting their time and just going through the process when you're really not 100% engaged in it anymore. And so I talked about doing it professionally. The next step. So that's all things that you want to do immediately. I would say within the first few days following your interview, you need to send a thank you. And I'm going to talk about outside of COVID and during COVID in this regard. So a career opportunity is a gift. Being invited to an interview is a gift. What do you do when you get a gift? You say thank you. So it's important that you don't just leave it hanging. I would recommend that, assuming somebody is physically working in the office, which is not common right now with COVID, I would do a handwritten thank you. It shows, I know it's old fashioned and I know folks rely on email today, but the fact that you sat down, you pulled out a note card or your own engraved letterhead, whatever it is you use, with family and friends, it shows that you took the time and you personalize it, you handwrote it. It's not a canned thank you email that you send to every job you do a phone screen for. So outside of COVID, I would say that, or if you're confident that they're in the office, I would say that. The last thing you want to do is send a thank you to an office where nobody is, and then they never see it until after they've already moved on with another candidate. So if you know that they're interviewing you virtually, you know that everyone's working virtually right now during COVID, you might have to resort to email. And that's okay. You can start it out by saying, I normally would send this as a thank you, handwritten thank you note, but in light of everyone working virtually, I'm resorting to email. That's okay. People will understand. How you do that thank you is very important. So I mentioned some people will just do a thank you for your time. I really appreciated interviewing with you. I look forward to hearing more, and their name, a very generic thank you. I've seen that approach. I appreciate that they said thank you, but it doesn't really say a whole lot. It doesn't show that you took a lot of time. You didn't, share anything that happened during the interview or anything that's really sparking your interest even further. So I wouldn't encourage that approach. It's better than nothing, but I wouldn't encourage it. I would take a more strategic approach there. So during that interview, and the person before me spoke about taking notes and writing down key points and key priorities that they bring up during the interview. You want to use those notes to customize your thank you note, just like you customize your resume, and you customize, you don't want to come in with canned answers to questions. You need to customize your thank you. So make sure that you address the priorities that they brought up. I'm so excited to see that one of your key initiatives is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm using that as an HR example, of course, but bring up something that they brought up as a priority that is a passion of yours and echo it again. So it shows that you were listening. It shows that you jotted down the priorities and you're that much more excited about them and the fit there. If they bring up actions within the first 90 days, this is your opportunity to brag again. So, don't make it a 3-page thank you note, but pick 1 or 2 to say, how confident you are in meeting those immediate needs that they brought up during the interview. We need this to happen like the first 30 days. What the prior person possibly wasn't able to finish, I'm excited to finish out and the initiative that so-and-so began. And this, so there are ways for you to brag about yourself and show your confidence of meeting those expectations that came up during the interview briefly in your thank you note. Remind them of that alignment. Remind them that you're the person that they need to be picking for this role without using those words, of course. The other thing is you want to make sure that you bring up, typically during an interview, you're not just interviewing these days with the person who you're going to report to. A lot of positions, you're going to interview with peers. Maybe you're going to interview with people that would report to you if it's a leadership role. Make sure that you highlight. So if I'm sending a thank you note to an IT person that happened to sit in on my HR interview, I'm going to want to bring up, I look forward to aligning the HR platform technology decision and having you sit in with me early in the process and us as a team so that you from the technical side and myself from the people side, make sure you customize it to their area of expertise as well. It just shows you paying attention. It shows you did your assessment. You had a thoughtful review of how the interview went. Gives you a chance to brag again and show your confidence. If they mentioned a timeline, what to expect next and when, let's say in walking you out to the lobby, they said, we have 1 more candidate to interview later this week. We're hoping to have a decision by next Friday. That's a gift of gold. So you have some sort of timeline that you can reference. If they gave that to you, I would recommend you echo that as the closing of your thank you note. Just to, again, remind them without, being a bug, remind them that I know you said you have a few more candidates this week and you're hoping to make a decision by next Friday. I look forward to hearing from you then. It just, once again, several days later when they get their thank you note or open their email, reminds them, ooh, I told her I would get her an answer by next Friday. And spell check, just like the recommendation that was given on your resume, please spell check it. If I get a thank you note and it's got a whole bunch of errors in it, or I've had a thank you note where someone literally like crossed through something and then wrote beside it. And I'm like, okay, that might have been your draft, but that's not what you mail. So spell check, make sure that it's worded well, and maybe have, if it's handwritten, have someone read it behind you. If it's email, make sure you use the gift of technology and spell check and grammar check. The next thing I would recommend, you've sent off your thank you note. I would recommend, assuming the interview went well, you're still very much engaged, connect with them on social media. You know, reach out. If I interviewed with 3 people while I was there, go out on LinkedIn, search their name and the company name, see if they happen to have a LinkedIn profile. I wouldn't put a huge message on it because you don't want to, you know, look like you're digging for more information and an answer sooner than they promised. But it's okay to just say, hey, great to meet you today. Happy to add you to my professional network. Leave it at that. It's one more personal touch point. They're seeing your face, they're seeing your profile, they're seeing your interest in them and the company. It's just one more personal touch point during that waiting period that's keeping your name and face top of mind. I wouldn't do a whole lot of questions or pressure or insight for selection, like I said, in that phase. Just happy to add you to my network at that point. The next thing, and I've seen a lot of this go the wrong way for candidates, and they didn't intend it, and it wasn't anything in their, well, it is in their control, but it wasn't what they expected. So make sure you alert your references. If you're at the phase of going in an in-person interview, those references that, you know, your boss from 4 years ago when you were, you know, teaching swim lessons in high school, you know, after around your school schedule, you haven't talked to them in 4 years, and they get a phone call from a company. Hi, I'm calling about Jenny Lee, and I would like to get a reference from you about her performance while she was employed with you. It's been 4 years and you haven't talked to the person. They don't know you're looking for a job. They don't know what this job is you've interviewed for. They're not going to be able to give that person a whole lot of confidence in responding about your performance or whether you'd be a good fit for their job. So if the interview went well and you are anticipating they are at a point of selection and references, I would definitely reach out. Hey, John, remember when you said you'd be a reference for me? I did list you on an application. I had a great interview today. I just wanted to make sure you remember that you said I could use you as a reference, and I really would appreciate, you know, that you provide that should they reach out to you. The job is, you know, XYZ. If they're open to it, I'd be happy to share the job description with you. You know, send them an email with the job description attached and your resume attached so they can see all the jobs you've had since you worked with them. Just make sure that you are top of mind so that when they get their call, they're not, now wait a minute, who was Jenny again? Oh yeah, Jenny, you know, that doesn't look good. So make sure you prompt your references and let them know that a call might be coming. Follow up after the date. So if they did give you that date, hey, we're hoping to have a decision by next Friday. They told you that, Friday's come and gone, you haven't heard anything and you're starting to get a little worried. I wouldn't be pushy, but at this point, it is okay to check in. So, you know, things happen, business gets in the way, somebody gets sick, somebody has a family emergency. So there are times that they're not going to meet the tentative deadline that they gave you. So be professional, don't be pushy. But it's okay, you know, come Monday to reach out and just say, hey, you know, I know you were hoping to make a decision by last Friday. Just wanted to touch base with you and make sure that there aren't any further questions I could answer for you. And I wanted to assure you that I remain very excited about this role. Leave it short, sweet, professional. You make a touch point. I would not, and I don't think anyone would, but I have seen it, believe it or not. I would not reach out and say, hey, you told me you were going to make a decision by last Friday and I haven't heard anything. The way you come across is very important because that's just going to make me feel like, okay, pointing out that I'm behind schedule and, you know, it's not a good impression. So just light and sweet there. Just checking in. Let me know if you have more questions. Shows you excitement, continued interest, recognizes business, reasonable delays, whatever. Just put it out there. I'm available. Let me know. So all of these things, obviously, all while you're being very, very patient. And that's really, really hard, especially if you're excited about this job. Or maybe you have the unfortunate pressure where you were laid off and financially you really need to find a job. So it's really hard to be patient. And I get it. I'm not the most patient person in the world. I have to keep myself busy. So that's why you take the time to do your assessment and you take your time to do your notes. You further research the company. There are lots of things you can do to distract yourself, to be patient, instead of reaching out to the employer repeatedly. Don't do that. Don't email them every couple of days, just checking in, just checking in, just checking in. Don't do that with the recruiter either. So just be patient. One other thing you can do while you're waiting, know your worth. So go out there. If they do come to you with an offer, you don't want to be stumbling over the financial piece of what you're looking for and whether they're coming in high or coming in low, or if they're offering extras, relocation benefits. You don't want to be stumbling over that. You want to know exactly what your worth is for this particular job. So go out. There's a lot of information on Google. It may not be exact, but go out there and say, what does Colliers International pay for a property manager in the city of Charlottesville? I'm picking on you, Lacey. So, you can go out there and you can specifically research your particular job in that city. And it may not be exact to that company, but it'll give you at least a ballpark of what the going rate is in that region for that type of job. Have that in mind. Also have in mind, what you were originally thinking as kind of your minimum. This is what I can't afford my house and my bills if I go below this number. I wouldn't start with that number. But have that in mind of what you're willing to negotiate down to as kind of a deal breaker. So know what you're worth, do some research around the comps, think through, is this job going to require me to relocate? Do I want to ask for relocation? Is this the type of job that a company would pay relocation for? So that's all things you could be doing while you're waiting to distract you, since you're very excited and it's hard to be patient. When they make that phone call, have handy with you. This is what I'm wanting in comp. This is what I'm wanting in benefits. This is what I'm wanting in relocation, whatever the case may be that you've brainstormed. And this is what I'm willing to negotiate down to. I wouldn't, again, share that. That's just so you have it right there in front of you on that call. And have those items prioritized. So start at the lowest priority. I'm willing to give on this. If that doesn't work, I'm willing to give on this. If that doesn't work, I'm willing to, until you work down to your, breaking point. That way, it helps you market yourself to get the best package deal possibly for the role. Keep applying. A lot of people I talk to say, hey, I feel awkward applying for other jobs when I'm the final candidate for this job, and I don't want them to think I'm not interested and they hear I'm interviewing somewhere else. Until they bring you an offer, it's okay to keep interviewing. It really is. It's okay to keep applying, and they'll respect the fact that you're considering all options and looking for that right fit position. So don't be shy about that. And then my last point, if you don't get the job, be professional. Ask them, was there any feedback I should keep in mind as I continue my career search and interviews in the future? Thank them for their time. Ask them, please keep me in mind for future openings. Don't get defensive. Don't ask them, what did I do wrong? What did the other candidate have that I didn't have? Keep it short and sweet. Ask for feedback, thank them, and say, please keep me in mind for future opportunities you think might be a great fit. May not be with them. They might have a friend who's an owner of a company down the street and they recommend you a week later. So keep it very professional, which I think has been a theme throughout this whole presentation from all of us. I think that's it for me, unless y'all have questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Man, that was a lot of really good information. I think we don't put much emphasis on that after the interview part. And that was I love the idea of sitting down right after and doing an assessment. That is so smart, so that you really can capture all those things. And like we said, if you decide the job's not a good fit, that's okay. And I like that Jenny gave us some tips for professionally declining it, and also knowing your worth. Like, that's very important. And then, yes, and I was thinking the same thing as you were talking. If you get that phone call or that letter, that email that says you weren't chosen, be professional. Don't take it personally. They don't know you personally. They don't know all your background and all your story. It is business. It's professional. And like Jenny said, you never know. You may not be the right fit for that position or that company, but they may have somebody in mind and they say, hey, I just interviewed this great person. I know, especially, and Melody can probably speak to this too, here in the banking world, a lot of the bank HR managers will kind of share different ones. If they know somebody's looking and they had an abundance of resumes for a position that they didn't need 12 people, they'll share those things. So it's important to be professional. Or maybe the person that they did choose, maybe it was very, very close between you and another candidate, and that other candidate just had a little something different or something extra. and that person turns it down. So they come back to you. So always be professional, always be gracious. So well, that is our time for today. I hope this was really beneficial and helpful. I know I got a lot out of it, and I really appreciate LaToya and Allison and Melody and Jenny for being here with us and all this information. We did record this webinar. It will be posted on our website a little bit later today, so you can check there. Feel free to share that. It's just a YouTube link, so you'll be able to share that with anyone that you think would be interested. We appreciate you all being here and hope you have an awesome rest of the day. We'll see if this winter weather comes. It's kind of been weird, but hey, that's kind of the story of life right now. Who knows? But anyway, thank you all so much and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.